Namaste, Jai Shri Ram, and welcome to Dharma Explorers. Dharma Explorers is a series of conversations with prominent personalities who are supporters of Sanatan Dharma but were not born in a Hindu household. I'm your host, Jai Bansal. I'm affiliated with the Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America, where I serve as the Vice President of Education. And today, it is my great pleasure to welcome Omer Ghazi ji joining us from Delhi, India. Namaste and very warm welcome to you, Omer ji.
Namaste, Jayji, and everyone who has been listening in. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to have a conversation. And I'm really looking forward, and I think this is really important to have conversations like these. So thank you again.
So, Omer Ghazi is a research associate at a public policy think tank, and he represented India at the Best Diplomats Dubai conference in 2023. He's also known for his columns on history, culture, and geopolitics. However, perhaps a better way to introduce him is through his creative side. Firstly, he's a drummer and a rap artist performing under the stage name MC Square, which I think is a take on Einstein's famous equation E equals MC square. Secondly, he has written a book with a very intriguing title, The Cosmic Dance, which, according to him, is a tribute to the confluence of ancient Indic wisdom and modern science. Lastly, let me read out one of his quotes. And he says, I started exploring the life and works of Adi Shankaracharya and discovered a treasure of ancient wisdom. It was mind boggling that complex concepts of consciousness, human experience, and the nature of reality were beautifully depicted through rhythm and poetry. Everything I ever loved was suddenly at one place. It felt like coming home. So I will conclude Omarji's introduction by noting that he is an Indic Muslim who is exploring his cultural heritage through music, science, and philosophy. Once again, Omarji, very warm welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for the amazing introduction. I'm really humbled by it.
So why don't we start with something very simple? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your growing up years, your family, your professional trajectory, and any specific influences that shaped your worldview?
Absolutely. I have grown up in the city of Delhi as well as the town of Aligarh, which is famous for Aligarh Muslim University. So I have been a student of AMU as well. So I have been very much interested into debates about philosophy, debates about the nature of reality since a very young age. I used to be an avid reader. I'm still don't get a lot of time to read nowadays, but I have been quite an avid reader for a long time, whether it's fiction, whether it's novels or poetry. So I had a bent of mind towards literature and philosophy since a very young age. And my influences by the time I reached high school, by the time I reached my college years, so my influences were quite broad. It covered everything from the Hellenistic philosophy of the ancient Greeks, what they had to say, what philosophers like Ibn Sina and everyone was saying 800 years ago, as well as the Western philosophers of contemporary times, of recent American philosophers, everyone from Bertrand Russell and everyone. So these were quite of my influences through my growing up years. And when it comes to literature, I was very much interested in novels, the classical English literature, especially Samuel Taylor Coleridge and H.G. Wells. So these were my influences. And my professional trajectory, so since I was into this, I went into the teaching line for a long time. I completed a course called Teaching English as a Foreign Language, that is TEFL. And I started teaching in different institutions, including DPS and all. But after that, since I was writing in different portals like First Post and Dainik Jagran and everything because I was interested in geopolitics and international relations. That's how I got a position in a public policy think tank. And for last 4 or 5 years, I have been working as a research associate in that public policy think tank. And simultaneously, I'm pursuing my writing career as well by writing different columns and everything. So that is a very brief introduction of my life trajectory, so on and so forth.
You've accomplished a lot already in a relatively short period of time, so congratulations on that.
Thank
And of course, in terms of your writing, you've written a very interesting book with a very intriguing title, The Cosmic Dance. Tell us a little bit about that book and what it's about.
So, like I said, that I had an interest in literature and philosophy since a young age. Uh, I, but I did not know about the gems of literature and philosophy that had originated in India. For a very long time, I was not aware of what ancient Indian philosophy had to say, because I think it's very unfortunate that young people, my generation, irrespective of religion, we are not very much in touch with our roots, cultural roots. So I think that is quite unfortunate. But I had been writing poetry on topics of science and philosophy since a very young age. There's a poem in my book, it's called Where is the Water? So, in that poem, I have discussed that uh, humans questioning reality and humans trying to find answers about reality is like a fish asking, Where is the water? Even though it's all around it, even though everything is right in front of you, but still we are unable to see. So we are seeking answers. It's like fish asking, Where is the water? So that's a metaphor I have used. So these are the kind of poetry I have been writing since a very young age, and it was accumulating for a long time, but it was mostly very random, very spontaneous, and I did not ever think that I will ever compile it in the form of a book. But uh, ever since in last 2 3 years, like you have quoted me saying that I encountered the works of Adi Shankaracharya, and there I found that there is sort of poetry, the sort of rhythm, the sort of questioning he has written more than 1400, 1500 years ago, and he is discussing such profound concepts. So that was very mind-boggling for me. So on one hand, I was writing poetry, and on the other hand, I was pursuing drums and rhythm and percussion instruments and music. So these were two very different things that I was pursuing since a young age. And all through my life, I had never seen them combine anywhere. When you see ancient Greek philosophers, uh, they are discussing philosophy, but there is no rhythm in poetry in their writings.
Mm.
Similarly, when you're discussing poetry, so they're not very philosophical. So now, when I found this confluence in Adi Shankaracharya, and when I saw that this is something, so I got drawn towards it. Then I started reading more about it, and then I discovered that the philosophy that is mentioned in ancient Indic scriptures, I started getting interested into Shaivism. I started understanding a little bit about what the cosmic dance of Shiva denotes and what it means. And I was, fascinated that it shows, the constant creation and destruction. It shows the constant rhythm, and that feeling was quite encapsulating for me. So in my poetry, it was rhythm, it was philosophy and everything. So I saw there was no better tribute to this thousands of years old tradition of question and answer, of inquiry, of doubt, of scientific inquiry. So that is why I decided to name the book The Cosmic Dance, because that is the tradition I think I'm associated with, and
Mm.
it is an extension into that thousands of years old tradition. So this is what the book is about, and this is what the title means to me. So That's what I wanted to discuss. Yeah.
Very interesting. Of course, combining philosophy with music is an old Indian tradition. I mean, it starts with
Right.
some, and in fact, all our major pieces of work from ancient time onwards have been versified. I mean, as opposed to prose. So you finding that taproot in music is yeah, obviously part of our tradition. Very, very interesting. Some of the wisdom that you are talking about, it takes many years to acquire that wisdom. So I congratulate you for coming to that realization at this early stage of your life. Now, your book, as you said, describes about coming together of the ancient Indic wisdom and the modern science. Of course, ancient Indian wisdom is a big ocean. It talks about the apara vidya, which is what concerns you and I, in the real world, and then there is the para vidya, which is more about discovering yourself. I'm just wondering which side of that, or is it all of it? I mean, what is your perception? Try to explore in the book.
I think there are some very fundamental principles mentioned in our ancient scriptures which need to be explored a little more. Usually, I think people mistake the science in ancient Indic scriptures to be in a very superficial manner, which gets easily debunked, and the conversation goes in a very different direction. It is not to say that the scientific gadgets we are using today they were present thousands of years ago in India in some form. I think that's a very crude and superficial understanding of scientific science in ancient times. I have tried to connect with it in a much more fundamental fashion. For example, there are certain basic principles like it talks about, for example, the Spandakarikas. The Spandakarikas means in Shiv, I think it's in Shiv Sutra, Spandakarika means the divine rhythm of creation, the divine vibration of creation.
Hmm.
Now, to say that all matter, all physical reality composes of vibration and rhythm is something that is was unheard of even 100 years ago or 200 years ago. It's something very recent that we have discovered when we have gone into the subatomic world. We have tried to understand things like string theory and the quantum particles and quantum fluctuations. We have come to understand that how fundamental it is to the physical reality. And thinkers like Nikola Tesla, they have been saying it for the last 100 years, and they were also not understood. That he said that if you want to understand the rules of nature, of universe, you need to think in terms of frequency and vibrations. So that is something mind-boggling. How did they know about it, and in what way were they thinking this? Another thing that fascinated me was that it mentions the Vedanta. The Vedanta puts the focus of the reality on the observer, means that the observer is primary while the observed world is secondary, which means that you are projecting yourself to your surroundings, and that's what constitutes your reality. Now, this is also very counterintuitive because the the natural way of looking at it is that you are a person in this world and the world exists in an objective way and you are perceiving it, and the world exists even if you, even if there is no one to observe it. The universe is objective. So this was the scientific view till only 200, 300 years ago.
Hmm.
But when we conducted experiments like the Young's double slit experiment, we realized that actually the reality does not exist as a concrete objective reality until and unless you observe it, which means that if no one is there to observe the universe doesn't exist. Which brings us to another point that the observer is basically reflecting his self, projecting himself on the reality, and that is what is constituting his whole universe. So now we are understanding it, and still it is very difficult to understand. Even today, if you try to explain it to a layperson, it is almost impossible, and he will not understand it. So, and we also haven't yet understood it completely. So, this is another fascinating aspect of ancient Indic wisdom, that which means that through meditation, through different techniques, those seers had certain understanding of reality which was unheard of at that time. And another thing that I got fascinated about was, as I have mentioned, is the cosmic dance itself. It is a fascinating, the constant rhythm of creation and destruction. It can be used to explain the dance of the subatomic particles, for example, inside the atom, right? So in the quantum world, there is a constant dance of creation and destruction. And that is the reason that at the CERN facility in Geneva, there is a huge statue of Lord Nataraj, and
Yes.
it casts a shadow on the building where scientists are trying to understand this divine dance of subatomic particles. So it means they have understood it in some at some level, in some way. So there are certain things that need to be explored more. I am still a novice, I'm still a beginner, and every day I'm exploring some new facets of this discussion. And but these are certain things that I really wanted to bring forward.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Actually, you bring a lot of different concepts in one place. This idea that how our rishis discovered some of the realities of the universe, there are examples in even in modern times. I mean, the entire Einsteinian, theory of relativity is through thought experiments. They're only being proven later on through observations. So yeah, the fact that someone 2,000, 5,000 years ago did some thought experiments and came up with some realizations is not outlandish, when you think about it. Let me change the direction a little bit of our conversation. As you know, Hindu soul has been sleeping for more than 1,000, 1,200 years for historical reasons, but it's starting to stir. They're becoming more aware of their civilizational narrative. And thank you for articulating beautifully what you are discovering in that space. But there are many more like you who are reconnecting with their roots, and it's becoming kind of noisy. And I wonder, uh, let's take it from a personal point of view. Do you see that as threatening to the Muslim ecosystem? And what does the Muslim society at large in Bharat think of everything that's going on around them?
There are different angles through which we can approach this question. When we say that whether this stirring of the Hindu soul is threatening the Muslim ecosystem, we first need to understand what do we mean by the Muslim ecosystem. The Muslim ecosystem that has a different agenda about India for the next 50 years that is not in line with the larger Indian society and its goals and the progressive human values, of course, it will feel threatened because it has certain value systems which are contradicting, for example, the constitutional values, the UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, equal women's rights. So it is if it is contradicting to the larger Indian society and its goals, of course it will be threatened. And if by Muslim intelligentsia or if by Muslim ecosystem, we mean certain Muslims who are either not very vocal or who are uh, connected in some way to the national framework and who are looking at themselves as first as a Bharatiya. And of course, the religious identity is also very important, but that becomes an add on that you do not have utmost importance just to the religion, but and the nation is secondary, but you have the national identity is intact, and that is more important as a Bharatiya. And then you are a Muslim also, obviously. That is your personal faith. You offer your namaz, you offer salah, you have your mosques intact. So no one is stopping you from your basic fundamental right. So that ecosystem, that Muslim ecosystem, however small, however large, that is not threatened, and that should not be threatened also because it has no reason to. If its goals are very much aligning with the constitutional framework and they are not confrontational with the larger Hindu majority, there is no reason to get threatened. And I am of the view that that ecosystem is growing.
Well, that's very heartening to hear, frankly. And I think what you are really saying is when we talk about Muslim ecosystem, it's not monolithic. There are many different constituencies within that. Some are
Hmm.
pulling back, others are trying to push forward, and we just have to treat them as a different entities in so many ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's I totally agree with you. And now, as far as how Hindu society treats different faiths, different religions, I think I don't have to probably say it, but we don't have any problem with how you connect with the divine. How you pray, where you pray, and that sort of thing, because we within ourselves have plenty of traditions, different traditions. It is only when the interaction becomes destructive, that's when obviously the Hindu society has to react. So just carrying on with that, Muslim society is viewed uh, as a minority, quote unquote, in India. Do you see yourself as a minority? And what, particularly in the Indian context, considering that there is this concept of ummah in Islam, should the Muslim society at large, anywhere, including Bharat, be considered a minority?
First of all, you mentioned the word minority, whether Muslims should be considered a minority in India or not. As per the Indian constitution, since all the religious uh, groups are considered equal by the definition by law, I
Hmm.
don't see any reason why in the book of law there should be any majority or minority. I don't identify myself every day 24/7 as a minority. And I think that's a very othering sort of approach towards living in a society. So that is a very idealistic point of view. And of course, there is sentiment that Muslims are a minority in the country and Hindus are the majority, and there are different minorities also. So now let's come down to the level that yes, there are majority and minority groupings in the Indian society. Coming to how minorities are treated or how Muslim minority is treated in the country, let me say it out loud, and it might be controversial, and I don't know if anyone has said it before like this or not, but I think Muslim minority is the most pampered minority in the whole world. Let me explain. The partition happened on the communal lines. Muslim League demanded that we want a separate country on the basis of religion, and they accomplished it by hook and crook. Now, whether Jinnah wanted a secular society, liberal society, that is not a matter of concern for India. The point is that they wanted a country on the basis of religion, and they, did the partition of the country on communal lines. And India, on the other hand, adopted that all the people will be governed by uh, human rights values, by constitution, and not by a theocracy. That's what India adopted. Now, the Hindu religion, the Hindu code, Hindu bill was codified. The In the constitution, the Hindu laws were codified, but the Muslim laws were not codified for whatever reason. You can call it a mistake of Nehru, you can call it whatever was the dynamics at that time. Let's not go into that. But the fact is that Muslim laws were not codified, and Muslims were allowed to govern themselves through Sharia by the Muslim personal law, and only in the civil laws, not in the criminal way. So they are picking and choosing among that also. So that is number one. Now, 30 years later, 40 years later, Shahabano happens. And there is the Sharia law and the Indian constitution are at loggerheads for the first time. And it was a very sensitive issue. And the whole Hindu community, the establishment, they bent over backwards to accommodate uh, the Muslim sensitivities. And now, after that, we are seeing that whether it is the Waqf board, whether it is the Muslim Personal Law Board, whether it is the welfare schemes, whether it is the minority institutions, whether it is the minority quotas. I mean, what do you want? What else do you want? I don't understand when we see a narrative being peddled out in social media by supposedly Muslim intelligentsia that Muslims have not gotten their due since independence. I mean, I find it very ugly. I find it very disturbing when someone says that. So that is my view on the majority minority groupings within the Indian society. Now, coming to the Ummah part, which you mentioned in the question, do I believe that whether Muslims should be considered a minority in any country or not? I think the concept of uh, Ummah, that all Muslims are one monolith across across the world, and they have their loyalties towards the Ummah more than their country. I think it many times throughout history it has proven to be not true. It has proven to not work. A very recent example is Pakistan and Bangladesh. Bangladesh would not have happened if it was a reality. It is perfectly natural for a person to get much more affinity towards someone he shares language with, he shares region with, he shares his geography. These are, I think, much more concrete factors through which a person connects with other person. I eat like my Hindu brother who lives in Western UP more than someone who lives in Norway or more than someone who lives in Syria or Libya. I will not feel, it will not be relatable for me. So I think every nation and Muslim community in every nation would have to be much more rooted, of course, in Islam itself, but that Islam would be a very different flavor of that country will be added to it, and that is how the nature works. That is how naturally, organically it happens. So I think this type of rootedness, I think, is very much more important than some global, loyalties. So that is what I think about it.
Right. I think you pointed out that the Muslim community has been pampered since India got independence for whatever reasons, for political reasons, for other reasons, so on and so forth. When a prime minister of country stands up in the parliament and says they have the first right to, you know,
Absolutely, it's very recent. Yeah.
that is actually very destructive to the coherence of the society. So you think India as a country is ready for getting rid of these disparities and having a single law that is applicable to every citizen of India.
India should be ready, and I think we are waiting for a certain political strength for that to happen. But I am waiting for it, and much more, and many more Muslims like me who believe in the progressive values. They are also waiting for it. Fingers crossed, it should happen because any archaic medieval law that contradicts the basic human rights of anyone, it needs to go away. We need to do away with it. There is no point in discussing, debating over them that whether it should be what are the cultural sensitivities, what are what does the book say, what does the certain cleric has to say. We don't even need to entertain these thoughts because the basic human rights of people, like you mentioned, women. So they are actual human beings that have suffered and that are suffering. So every day wasted is a crime in my eyes. So I think we need to take this issue as seriously as possible. If India will not do it, then who? I think India has to take charge for other countries also, that this is possible and this has to be done.
Right. Well, when when Muslims come to America, they have to follow the American laws. So, what's different about Bharat, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for articulating that. Then there is the whole Waqf board that is doing what it's doing. Do you do you think it behaves in a responsible fashion for for Indian society? And do you think we need it?
I don't understand how it transpired in the first place, because on one hand, it's quite funny that on one hand we keep claiming that Muslims have not gotten its due in this country since independence, and it's an oppressed minority. It does not have its basic rights in place, and we are constantly being persecuted by the majority. But at the same time, the Waqf board is the third largest landowner in the country, and these two things don't go hand in hand together at all. And I think that the how it acquired those lands, it's a matter of concern. I'm not aware about the details, but it is an archaic and medieval thing that a religious institution should have that much control over that area of land. So I think that do not we are not in a position to let it continue like that. So I don't see any reason for that. Yeah.
Let me then take you to a slightly different direction, and that is, look at yourself. You are speaking the language that I would be speaking. How I relate to my civilizational narrative. You're relating to it, even though you are a practicing Muslim. That hasn't happened, in long, long time. But there are many, many progressive voices like that. We're hearing people are writing about these issues for a change, which is very refreshing. And then we see phenomena like, Smriti Irani ji is being taken to Medina. We have a major temple come up in Abu Dhabi. Ilyasi ji taking part in Shri Ram Mandir Pran Pratishtha ceremony. And I'm just wondering if these phenomena that we're seeing in our times, whether they are just some random coincidences, or they are, there is something happening with the Muslim ecosystem.
Okay, so there are two aspects of looking at this. One is the cultural aspect, and one is the political aspect. So I'll very briefly discuss both of them. On the cultural front, I think what is happening is that the first thing that has contributed to this phenomenon is, of course, the interaction between the two communities steered forward by internet and social media. I think that is the most important thing, and I'm myself a product of it. When you are growing up in a household and you are fed fables and stories about the other community, and you don't have your interaction with the other for the 10, 20, 15 years of your life, when you're growing up, it's very difficult to come out of that uh, feeling, that fear, because of course when you don't understand something, you fear it, and fear begets bigotry. First comes ignorance, ignorance leads to fear, and fear leads to bigotry. Now if we try to understand the other side, and we see that okay, he might be a practicing Hindu, he might be a practicing Christian, but he is just like a human like me, and he is connecting with the divine in his own way. So when you understand and when you interact through social media, through your friends, so those feelings of fear and bigotry and ignorance, they get diluted away and they might slowly disappear. And in that framework, everyone has their own journey. Some people reach different levels, some people use that social media for negativity also. Nobody is saying that everything is hunky dory and it's all positive. There are people who use that internet and use that social media to spread just negativity in the society. They
Mm.
are using it for communal trying to instigate the Hindu majority and everything within my own community as well, a huge number. But when we are discussing the phenomenon of progressive Muslim voices and who are much more rooted in Sanatan Dharma, in the Bharatiya culture, in the Hindu society, so that phenomenon is much more coming from the interaction, I would say, and reading. When you read history, you see trends, what has happened. That's how you get there. So that is one thing. Another thing that I'm seeing, you mentioned that Smriti Irani ji was taken to Medina and the Arab world is opening up, which was not possible, which was like unheard of 10 years ago, I would say. 10, 15 years ago, it was unheard of. So I think there are some political angles of that as well. Of course, the Arab world is understanding that they cannot continue like this, and the kind of society they had created for over last 30, 40 years, it was not working. It was in contradictory. It was confrontational to the larger global society. So I think that is how they're opening up their society to. They want people to come to their country as tourists, as investors. So there is an economic angle to that as well. And by doing that, while doing that, they are realizing that this feels good. This is good. I mean, uh, what is the problem if India can have more than 5 lakh, 6 lakh mosques? Why can't Abu Dhabi or Saudi Arabia have some temples? Especially when there is a large Hindu population that is residing and working there and contributing to its economy. I don't see any problem. So that phenomenon is much more political, and it also doesn't hurt that India is emerging as actually a big political power on the global scene. Whether it's Israel-Palestine conflict, whether it's the Russia-Ukraine conflict, India is emerging as a strong mediator in all these conflicts. So the Arab world also is seeing that we want good relations with India. So of course we would want some cultural exchange also. So this is also happening. But I hope that, this continues and we have much better relations with the Arab world as well. Now that they are on the right trajectory, especially UAE. I'm very much when I went there last year, it was a very positive experience. I met many Muslims, Arab Muslims, who had a very positive view of India and Hinduism and the Indian society. So that was quite refreshing to see. And so this is the kind of phenomena I think that we are observing.
I think that's the right perspective. There are many different factors, but it's nevertheless it's good to see the society opening up to new ideas and feeling comfortable in sharing the stage with Hindu faith. But then there is the other side. There is also a wave of radicalization that is taking place everywhere, but I'm more concerned about Bharat. Being a student of history, try to look for examples where these two forces are, coming together. And you go back to the 17th century, and you look at example of Dara Shikoh, who is a very progressive Muslim. He's studying Hindu scriptures, and then you have Aurangzeb. So, opposite end of the spectrum. What do you think of that comparison? And also, I just hope, and I hope you agree with me that history does not repeat itself.
The radicalization, like I mentioned in my last answer as well, that everything is not positive, everything is not hunky dory as we would like to imagine. If some people are using the internet, if some people are using their uh, political power to exert some positive influence, there is a huge number of people who are only using that political power or that knowledge for creating differences in the society. Coming to the Muslim society and the radicalization, that problem is deep seated and deep rooted and has been there since the very beginning. And even today, when we see the organizations like PFI, for example, their agenda for 2047, it was, some document came out last year, and they had a completely different perspective of what they want to make of the Indian society. and it was completely detrimental to everything that India stands for. And it's not just one organization, they have their roots in very deep in the psyche of the larger Muslim community. A lot of madrasas, they are spewing out the sort of radicalized mindset among the common people, and through the mosques and through the that stage that they have, they continuously pump it in the larger Muslim psyche, and that contributes, and out of that, it erupts into violence. Obviously, if you're pumping that sort of thing into 1,000 people, 10 out of them will act on it also.
Yeah.
Now that problem is very much there, and of course everybody is trying to solve it in their own way, and they're trying to contain the problem. Especially when you mention Aurangzeb and Darashikoh, there is a very interesting phenomenon that I have observed in the Muslim community, that on one hand we try to claim that we have ruled over this country for 800 years, and we have made the Taj Mahal, we have made the this, and we have made that, and we are the rulers, we had been the rulers. But at the same time, when someone asks about the atrocities by Aurangzeb or by Babur, now suddenly we are saying that we have nothing to do with that 800 years. We are today's population. We live only today. We are the children of the constitution, and we will only discuss about what happened after partition, after independence. And please don't discuss history with us. Now that is a dichotomy. These two things cannot go hand in hand together. If you take pride in Taj Mahal, you have to apologize for Aurangzeb also. There is no dichotomy, there is no contradiction in that. So that is one problematic aspect that comes from the Muslim community. The solution to that is that, of course, nobody is asking for Muslims of today to take responsibility of what Aurangzeb did, or what Babur did, or what the Delhi Sultanate Iltutmish did. But it is not an unreasonable demand that you dissociate yourself from these figures. I think that's a very reasonable demand, and you have to do it vocally. It's not understood. You have to come out and you have to declare that you have nothing to do with the ideology that perpetrated violence on the Hindu community of this country for centuries. That needs to be spelled out. And if you are not spelling it out, then there is a problem, and that will create friction in the society. And I'm very clear about it. And obviously, like you mentioned, Dara Shikoh, it's not like that all the Muslim figures were completely out there to commit genocide of the Hindu community. There were figures like Dara Shikoh who were actually rooted in the Indian society, and they had a very amenable relation with the society. So we need to choose our heroes wisely. We need to choose our idols wisely, and if we are not doing that, we cannot cry victim. We cannot cry victim that we are being singled out. We have been asked questions. We are asked to prove our loyalty. We have been asked to prove our rootedness in the society. You will be asked, and you have to come clear of it. So today, it is that the mantle is upon the Muslim society to declare who are your heroes, and we have certain figures that we can choose as our heroes. And if we are not doing that, we are in trouble.
Is there a phenomenon of identity crisis in the Muslim society, particularly of the Indian subcontinent? One fine morning, you're a Hindu, you're practicing your faith, you celebrate the festivals and all the things that Hindu society around you does, and then you're forced to change your religion. Next morning, you are in a different religion, and you are told to hate everything that your forefathers have believed in. That basically dissociates you from the entire civilizational history of that society, of that country. You have to wonder that individual, that society that is just converted, who are they? Where they come from? What is their history? And I'm just wondering if that plays out, the identity crisis plays out, and that's why they reach out to whether it's the Arabic identity or Turkish identity and so on and so forth.
Absolutely, there is an identity crisis because, like you mentioned, if you are completely cut off from what you are, basically, what you have been for thousands of years, of course, there will be a dissonance in your personality, and it will play out in the form of frustration, in the form of violence, in the form of self-hate, and in the form of hating your own brother who lives the next door. When a person has changed his religion and he has been asked to hate everything about his forefathers and about the whole uh, historical tradition that has made him what he is, superficial at a superficial level, you can claim to be whatever you want to be, but you cannot change your DNA. You cannot change your language. You cannot change your skin color. You cannot change what you like to eat. You cannot change your hair color. You cannot change what every cell in your body denotes. Now the problem is if you have not dealt with this question deeply. The best example of this identity crisis is Pakistan. What they did was at a conceptual level, and I think that is why there cannot be any peace in Pakistan because the whole concept is communal and the whole concept is uh, identity crisis. That is the problem. So that is why an average person there, they try to like you said, associate themselves with Arabs, or they want to associate themselves with Turkish society, which doesn't work because there is no similarity. And above all, the Arabs don't consider you as their people. The Turks don't consider you as their people. In fact, they consider you inferior. If you're living in the Arab world, if you're living in an Arab country, you're living there for 20 years, they won't give you citizenship. They will consider you inferior. Obviously, that is the kind of that's how the cultural and geopolitics works. So if if you are understanding your own roots and you're becoming rooted, you are only doing a favor to yourself. You're not doing anybody a favor by understanding who you are. Yeah, I think it's in the path of your self discovery, of your self realization. It's just another step. And in the ancient Indic tradition, the whole focus is on discovery of self.
Yes,
The whole question is who am I? And above that, the question is what am I? But till the time you don't reach what am I, at least you have to solve who am I
sure.
at a cultural, at a political, at a personal level. So that sort of identity crisis. But let me tell you something very interesting. Now that identity crisis has been there for last, ever since independence, for example, but right now it's taking a very interesting turn because now, till now, the radical Muslim was looking at the Arab world as their granddaddy. And the Arab world was pumping Wahhabism through madrasas and everything in India and in the whole subcontinent. But now the Arab world is changing direction for whatever their economic reasons, their political reasons, and maybe because of they want looking at a post-oil world, whatever the reason. Now they are changing. Mohammed bin Salman is doing phenomenal work and he's doing it very fast. Sometimes I fear for him also. But now that he is doing it very fast, now the average person in India who was looking at the Arab world as their ideological parent, now they are becoming orphaned because now you either now the reaction comes in two ways. Now there are some of them who are saying that now the Arabs are not real Muslims. The Muslim, the Muhammad bin Salman is not a real Muslim. He is in cahoots with Israel or whatever. So that is one reaction. The other reaction, which is much more sensible, is uh, thinking about it from a second time. You delve into it at a deeper level that okay, the Arab world is not in line with what I imagine myself to be. Then again the question will haunt you. Then who am I? Then you will find the answer that okay, I am a Muslim. I might be a Muslim. However, my parents got converted, it doesn't matter. Maybe it was willfully, maybe it was forced. Now we don't know. 500 years later, nobody knows anything about it. But what I do know is that my DNA is same as the Mishra ji living next door. So I have to understand that reality, accept that reality, and make peace with that reality. That is the only way to solve the identity crisis. But it's not going to happen in a day. It's going to happen, I think, over decades because the kind of ideology that has been pumped in the Indian Muslims that it was over decades. So the realization will also happen over years and years and years. But I think we will go in that direction sooner or later.
Thank you so much, Omarji. Seeing young voices realizing and trying to find their place in the world and realizing, hey, we've been misled. This is our home. This is where we need to make our future for us. So I thank you for sharing your thoughts and, of course, for being so generous with your time. And yes, thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking with you. Namaste.
Thank you so much once again, and I feel really grateful for having me and for allowing me to share whatever little observations I have made through my short span of life that I have lived yet. But it's really refreshing, and the whole message, the whole point that I have been trying to make through recent years, including this conversation, is conversation, and I think it's very important for in the process of nation building. That should be the basic aim and agenda of every individual, and everything else should align with it. Your religion, your philosophy, your personal life should align with the concept of nation building. It resolves all the frictions within society. So I think if we are clear with that, then I think our combined society will have a positive future, will have synergy, will have that constructive outlook that we all want. And as a Bharatiya and as an Indian and as an Indian Muslim, I am looking forward to that kind of society. So thank you again for having me and for being lovely host.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.